Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. Kia ora tātou katoa te whare. Mr. Speaker, today is the anniversary of the arrests at Bastion Point, the 25th of May 1978. Back then, 222 of us were hauled off to the clink and charged with trespass. Not a big charge back in those days, but today things are different. As we see from the police paranoia and the terrorist raids on Tūhoe a couple of years ago, even simple charges like trespass seem to have taken on a greater seriousness as the state targets those it wants to shut down, using charges which allow them to call out the Armed Defenders Squad and using the media to beat up stories that the court is showing have no substance whatsoever in the harsh light of day. So when we talk today about the list of 32 charges which will make up the 3 strikes criteria...
41.
41?
41.
I've just added another one. 42 charges which will make up the 3 strikes criteria in this third and final reading of the Sentencing and Parole Reform Bill. Believe me, Mr. Speaker, that's only today's list. It won't be long before trespass and other similar charges will be added to the list by politicians too dumb, too lazy, and too mean-spirited to resolve issues intelligently, and who choose the big stick as the resort of first choice. And to no one's surprise, it will be Māori who suffer most when that happens. Mr. Speaker, prison statistics tell us that even though Māori are only 14% of the population, we are 50% of the prison muster and have been so for more than 20 years. And if you think that's bad, believe me, this 3 strikes bill is going to make it much, much worse. Because without decent rehabilitation programs, first strikers and second strikers will carry on getting it wrong because they're not learning anything. They're simply reacting to problems in the only way they know, and they're going to get hammered. And because I suspect a lot of people in this House don't believe me, I recommend that they read the countless reports which vividly detail the historical tragedy of systemic bias and outright racism against Māori in respect of arrests, charges, convictions and jail sentences in this country. Reports which tell us that given equal numbers of Pākehā and Māori being arrested for similar incidents, the ones who are more likely to get charged are the Māori ones. Reports which tell us that given equal numbers of Pākehā and Māori going to court on similar charges, the ones who are more likely to get convicted are the Māori ones. Reports which tell us that given equal numbers of Pākehā and Māori being convicted on similar charges, the ones who are more likely to get sentenced to jail are the Māori ones. And reports which tell us that given equal numbers of Pākehā and Māori getting sent to jail on similar charges, the ones who are more likely to get the longer sentences are the Māori ones. And for those who doubt this scenario, I urge them to give me a ring. I'll be happy to organise a seminar with a Pākehā lecturer to confirm what I'm saying today. So, Mr. Speaker, when I tell you that Māori are the ones who will cop the dirty end of this 3 strikes bill, you can believe it. Mr. Speaker, it's a short-sighted man who thinks that legislation sending people to jail for a long time reduces crime rates. It's a blind man who sees justice in sentencing people to life for responding to circumstances they have little control over. And it's a bloody fool who thinks that this bill will do anything else but create frustration, anger and violence within our prison population. An anger that will explode at any reason and at any time, because when you're in jail for life, the only question you consider when faced with conflict is not, gee, what can happen to me if I do this? No, it's what else can they do to me? Now, there's nothing they can do. I know. I've been to jail. I've been in the mainstream wing. I've been in the remand wing. And I've been in the separation wing. And if you're in the separation wing and you're faced with conflict, you don't worry about what the bloody jailer's going to do or what the system's going to do. They can't do any more because you're already in there. So I know what I'm talking about here. And 100% of the rest of the MPs in this House don't. And when politicians talk about a safe society, let me ask this question. What about the next generation who have to grow up with the children of those who have been jailed for life? children who will grow up with a deep-seated and very real hatred of society for a life below the margins that they have been forced to lead, a hatred that will be visited back upon society through ever-increasing rates of mayhem and murder. And that, of course, will add weight to the cause for more guns for the police, and that will lead to more guns for civilians, and that will lead to bigger guns for criminals, until the only question we will have left to ask ourselves will be, when did we become the southernmost state of the gun-loving USA? Because that's the future we give ourselves with a bill like this. That's the only future of a society that treats the punishment of its members with the contempt being contemplated by this legislation, that refuses to take the steps of intelligent societies to reduce offending by reducing the causes of that offending rather than jailing offenders for life. Heck, even our own ombudsman admits that there are smarter ways than prison to prevent crime and make criminals accountable, and that prison is not the most effective or efficient approach to reducing crime. And yet what are we doing? We're building more prisons, we're double bunking them, we're making plans to keep people in them for life, and we're dumb enough to think that we can tell how well we're dealing with crime by counting how many people we've put into prison. Mr. Speaker, Corrections got $500,000 in 2000, nearly $1 million in 2008, and it's predicted that we will spend $2 billion by 2020, and that's without the three strikes bill being factored in. So you've got to ask the question, is that what this government thinks our society should be spending its money on? Yes, we've got a problem with violent crime in this society, no question. And yes, we've got to do something about it. But let's at least be intelligent about it and look to other international examples where rehabilitation and reintegration into society have been proven to work over the lock 'em up and throw away the key model. Because research tells us that places that have trialled three strikes have higher murder rates, bigger prison populations, and leave a huge impact on marginalised populations, read Māori when I say that, and higher costs and negative impacts on the families of offenders. Mr. Speaker, I'm not a great fan of British justice, but I note that the Justice Committee of the British House of Commons recently made the case for justice reinvestment, calling for a more holistic approach to crime reduction by tackling the conditions of criminality, poverty, low educational attainment, drug and alcohol problems, and the lack of housing and employment. Their report came out of very clear evidence that prison is a very expensive way of dispensing justice and seeking reform, and concluded that justice reinvestment was a far more prudent, rational, effective and humane use of resources. Last week, Mr. Speaker, Dr. Peter Sharples took a step down a similar path when he announced the establishment of 2 reintegration units where the focus will be on helping inmates prepare for life outside the wire, using kaupapa Māori to help them get jobs and accommodation, and help them improve relationships with whānau and with their communities. But even still, Mr. Speaker, it seems that our focus is elsewhere, because only 5%, Mr. Speaker, of justice and correction budgets are spent on rehabilitation, reintegration and crime prevention. Only 5%. While the majority of the money gets burnt up in admin, staffing, buildings and beefed up security measures for bigger prisons. And when you spend only 5% of your budget on rehabilitation, you can guarantee that all your highfalutin plans will not only fail, they will eventually come back to bite you on the backside, and if not you, then certainly your children and your grandchildren. Mr. Speaker, the Māori Party opposes this bill with all its heart, and we will work with whomever it takes to develop intelligent policy over knee-jerk idiocy and rehabilitation over degradation. Kia ora tātou katoa.